Which is a fantastic opportunity by Dwayne to just come up here and share a bit about my story, and in particular my story from my career perspective. So what my career has been like and how I've gotten to where I am today. So when I was a little kid, I loved playing with Lego. Lego was my favourite thing of all to do. I just always wanted to play with Lego. And I didn't so much just like playing with Lego, I just like building it. So once I build something, I just want to take it apart and build it again or build something else. And out of that love of Lego, I became really interested in architecture. And I thought, I could be an architect. So from a little kid, always wanted to be this idea of being an architect. And so that was my goal, that was what I strived for. I went to school, I worked really hard at school, did pretty well at school and was able to get into architecture. Got into this thing I'd been working for my whole life, to get into this architecture degree. Ended up moving up to Queensland, because my family moved up there, so I went up there to study architecture. And didn't really like it. It wasn't what I wanted it to be. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be. It was quite different from my expectations. And so I became a bit disenchanted from the world of architecture. Whilst I was studying, I got a chance to do a bit of work though. I got to do some work with the Department of Housing up there in Queensland for the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander housing unit. So through that, I got to do some stuff that I thought was really good actually. I got to actually design houses for our community all over Queensland. I designed houses for people in Townsville, in Mackay, and Thursday Island, all around Brisbane. I got to design houses and make sure they were houses people really needed, that were really going to help them. And so that was a really powerful thing to be able to do. So that side of architecture I really quite liked, but there are other parts of it that I really didn't like at all, and I just didn't fit with how they were trying to teach me, what they were trying to get me to do. Just didn't fit, especially when in my work life I was doing this stuff that felt really important, to then go to university and do this stuff that didn't feel quite as important. So it turns out for my last year, I failed my last course, my last subject I had to do. This is a design subject. You have to spend the whole semester designing a building and documenting it and describing it to people, and I failed that subject. And I was a bit resigned. I thought, this is, I've wasted all this time now. I'm not going to be able to pass. I'm not going to get my degree. What's all this amounted to? Just out of luck though, I called up someone to see what credits I could get from the work that I'd done so far. And they said that actually I was eligible for a supplementary exam. It's a rare thing that happens in the design field, but I could go into a room for 3 days on my own and try and design something, and if I did an okay job, I would be able to pass. And so I took that opportunity. So for 3 days, on my own, I just walked into this room, I got a brief of what I had to design, I worked on it all day, had to leave it there, go home, come back with nothing, start from what I'd done the day before, and did that for 3 days, and did just enough to be able to pass. So I actually got my degree from architecture. And that made me one of only a very small number of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who had done architecture, which was a really fantastic thing to be able to do, and it's something I encourage lots of people, if you do have an interest in design, to go into that field, because it can be a fantastic thing to do. But it wasn't quite what I wanted to do, as I realised through my work and through what I had been doing at university. So I got an opportunity. One of my close colleagues at work had suggested I apply for a cadetship with the Indigenous graduate program with the Commonwealth Government. As you'll hear no doubt over these couple of days, the Commonwealth Government has a huge range of jobs. You can work for the Australian Government doing all sorts of things. And as I said, I was living in Brisbane at the time, and I applied and said, right, I'm a graduate, I've got a degree in architecture, but I'll go to any department that will take me, as long as it's in Melbourne. Because I wanted to go back home, that's where my family was, I wanted to go back to Melbourne. So I went through that process and I got selected. I was able to go down to Melbourne and work in the Department of Education and Employment and Workplace Relations. Totally nothing to do with architecture whatsoever. And my first 3 months of that job, I was on the phones, on the Work Choices info line, where I had to tell people how much they could be paid to be a hairdresser, how much they could be paid to be a waitress. That was my job, to look up on the computer and find out what they could or couldn't be paid and tell them that information. So I did that for a couple of months, which was really quite different from the world of architecture. But I also got some rotations in Indigenous employment. Got to work out, working with community, working out what could be done to help give employment opportunities for our community. And that was a really great job to be able to do. I really enjoyed doing that. So I stayed doing that work with the Commonwealth Government. And then along came this little thing on my desk at some point in time saying there was a chance to come along to go to a leadership workshop, men's leadership workshop. I thought, okay, sounds pretty good. I'll give that a go. I put my name in. I got selected for that. And that's how, I think it's 11 years ago, I ended up in this very room here today. This is where the leadership workshop was held. And with those two gentlemen at the back there, with Dwayne and Uncle Benny, they were the two people helping run that leadership workshop right here in this room 11 years ago. And it was a pretty powerful workshop, and I got inspired by the type of work that Dwayne was doing in particular about how he facilitated things. And it got me thinking about, that's a pretty cool job, to be able to stand up there and talk to people about things and share your story and encourage people and inspire other people to be able to do great things. So that was a little kernel that sat in the back of my brain of a great possibility for the future. I left the Commonwealth Government though and I went and worked for the state government in Victoria in the area of infrastructure, so it's kind of related to architecture but not really. And obviously I did something right in the work I was doing because I got tapped on the shoulder and told that they wanted me to apply to be a manager of the Metropolitan Heritage Programs. They wanted me to help manage looking after our cultural heritage in the landscape for the whole Melbourne region, pretty much, to be the manager of that area. And this was something that was an amazing opportunity because my dad had worked in that space for a very long time and was a well-respected man in that area. And so to have that chance to work in that area was fantastic. So I took that chance, got that job there, and through that I actually had to start running some workshops as part of that role, helping Indigenous people from around Victoria come and learn more about our cultural heritage. And that reignited that little flame I had about being able to facilitate things. And so I got in touch with Dwayne and said, keen on doing this sort of thing. I said, oh yeah, I might be able to help you out in some of those things. And so time had come through all my work in the government that I could take long service leave. It's a pretty rare thing to be able to do, but that's one of the benefits of working for the government. You can transfer your long service from one place to the next. And so at the age of 32, I took my 10 years of service, long service leave. And got to take 6 months leave and took that time to set up my own business as a facilitator, running workshops. Dwayne invited me to come along and work with him on that, and so I learned a lot from him. And then I started getting some jobs through that, running cultural awareness sessions. And so these days, that's my main job, is I come along to different organisations and I run about a 3.5-hour workshop around them better understanding what our culture is and better engaging with us as a community. From that, I then got kind of back into the world of architecture and inspired by some of the work in the leadership area to set up Indigenous Architecture and Design Victoria, a not-for-profit group trying to encourage more Aboriginal people to be involved in the world of design and the world of architecture. And I was made the executive officer of that organisation to go out there and try and encourage more of our community to be involved, which was a fantastic opportunity through that. And around that same time, I got another tap on the shoulder where someone said, you should apply to be on one of these boards, these water boards. Because at the time they knocked off everybody on the boards and said we want new people in there. And in particular, they wanted more Aboriginal voices. The government, like we've heard a lot of times already today, across these couple of days, the government said we want more Aboriginal people involved, in particular around water. I don't know anything about water. It's not anything I'm an expert on. People kept encouraging me, so I thought, all right, I'll give it a go. I applied. And I got appointed to be a director at Western Port Water down at Phillip Island. So I was then another government role I had now as a director, overseeing the management of water and sewerage for all the people who live on Phillip Island, down where the penguins are. I was now on the board with 7 other people, making decisions about what should happen to people's drinking water, how we should take care of it, how we can make sure all the sewage gets out of the way. We don't mix up the water and the sewage because that's a bad thing to do. So that was a really fantastic appointment I had there as a director of a big corporation. I was part of the government and helping make decisions that were important. And when I first started that role, I was like, well, I'm not an expert on water and I know a bit about architecture. I'm not sure what I can offer as part of that board. But one of the beauties of those types of things, when you can be involved at whatever level it is, in some sort of board, some sort of advisory group, some group decision-making entity, is that everyone brings their own level of expertise. And whilst I didn't know as much about finances as the other person, I didn't know much about infrastructure, I didn't know as much about legal stuff, I knew about the Aboriginal community, I knew about cultural heritage, I knew about things that they didn't know about, I knew about place, I knew about the importance of connecting with people. And so I drew from my strength to help that organisation. And that was a really powerful lesson for me, that no matter what knowledge you have, you can recognise the value of the knowledge that you have that other people might not have, and draw from that as a strength. I was on that board for a couple of years and then I got another tap on the shoulder. This is an ongoing theme throughout my life, that I got tapped on the shoulder. I don't think it's an accident. It wasn't just luck that someone would tap me on the shoulder. I look back at some of those times and think a lot of it got to do with that. Every time I had a chance to do something, I did the best I possibly could. Because you never know who's going to be watching. You never know what that's going to lead to. You might think, this is not quite what I want to do. It's probably not going to be interesting, so I might come along and do a half-assed job. I didn't do that. Every time I had a chance to do something, I did it the best way I possibly could. And from that, people noticed that. And that's why I got these taps on the shoulder, because I was doing a good job. So I got tapped on the shoulder to apply to be a commissioner for the Victorian Environmental Water Holder. I was like, what? What is the Victorian Environmental Water Holder and what is a commissioner? But I thought, I'll give it a go. That's what I've always done. There's an opportunity there, I'll give it a go. Rarely is it that I've thought, oh, I'm really ready for that, and now I'm going to go apply for it. It's always been the case of, I don't really know about that, but I'm going to give it a go. Even if you're not ready, you step up. That's been my lesson. So I stepped up, I applied to be a commissioner for the Victorian Environmental Water Holder. The government there in Victoria had specifically created a new position where they wanted an Aboriginal voice, again, on that board to help them make decisions. They had 3 commissioners already, but they wanted a 4th. They wanted an Aboriginal voice. And I was fortunate enough to be selected, not just by the minister. A lot of these appointments you get by a minister. I was actually appointed by the Governor of Victoria and endorsed by Cabinet to be a commissioner for the Victorian Environmental Water Holder. And that's a role I've held now since 2017. I was just reappointed this year, again as a commissioner for the Victorian Environmental Water Holder. It's a pretty amazing job being part of the Victorian Environmental Water Holder. So what we do is, when we look around our landscape today, we see all our rivers. Sadly, they don't work the way they used to. They don't work the way we used to have them when we were around. It was only us as the Aboriginal people. They've been changed a lot. They've been dammed, they've been moved, they've been blocked, they've been changed a lot. We need that water for agriculture, we need it for drinking, we need it for all sorts of things. But we've taken too much. And so the government decided we want to give some of it back to the environment. So they created a pool of water and said, this water is just for the environment. And so my job as a commissioner to decide where that water goes across all of Victoria. So myself and my other 3 colleagues, we're responsible for determining where all this water goes in Victoria. And it's an amazing opportunity to, again, bring that Aboriginal voice. I don't have the same expertise as the other people around the table, but I've got my perspective and I've got my understanding of our community, of place, of the landscape, of sustainability that comes from an Aboriginal perspective. And so I bring that to our decisions so that we can get better care of the environment. And one of the things I'm really proud of is the last month, actually, through that role, I've had a great privilege of being involved directly in helping our community through that. One of those was there was this water hole out in Tangarong country in Victoria that hadn't been getting any water because it used to flood. The rivers used to flood, but now they stop it from flooding. And when it flooded, all these water holes, they filled up with water. Because they've controlled the rivers that don't flood anymore, this water hole hadn't gotten any water for 10 years or so. And that was a really important water hole for the Tangarong women. That was one of their important dreaming sites. And so we listened to them and what they wanted to try and do and worked out a way to make sure we could get water there. So I got to go there last month to be there with the Tangarong women, singing in their language, welcoming back that water. So that's one of the roles that I've been able to play as a commissioner. Another was just last week up in Mildura. I was up there in Mildura seeing the work that we do through our water. And there was this site that it's almost impossible to describe. It's really hard landscape up there. But there are some dunes, there's some sand dunes around the place. And because it was so hard, those sand dunes were the only place that the Aboriginal people from that area could bury their ancestors, replace those remains. And so there's this amazing site where there are, we believe, hundreds of remains, a cemetery, an amazing cemetery of ancestors there buried. But because of what's happened to the climate, and there hasn't been getting enough water at that place, the wind had blown the sand away, and those remains were now exposed. In more recent years, they've done some work to bring back that sand, but it's going to keep blowing away unless we can do something to the surrounding environment. So having been there last month, we've decided now we're going to make sure we put water in there to look after those trees to make sure there's no more wind going to blow away that to protect our ancestors. So those are the sorts of decisions that I'm able to be involved with as a Commissioner for the Victorian Environmental Water Holder. These are the types of things that we can play a role in across government. Any form of government, there are opportunities to have that role, to have that say, to contribute, to put forward that Aboriginal voice that no one else is putting forward. And so I've had the great fortune throughout my life to be able to do that, through Westport Water, through the Victorian Environmental Water Holder. And also more recently I got appointed to the Heritage Council of Victoria, and so we decide what happens to the old buildings, which buildings should be looked after, which developments can go ahead. So actually last month I sat on a panel where I was 3 of us, I was one of 3, who had to listen to evidence for 3 days about whether this childcare centre should be built. And then I was one of the people who had to decide yes or no it should be built. And we were the judge and the jury for that. And so that's another one of the roles that I've been able to get through government, through taking opportunity, through going for stuff that didn't feel comfortable, but I went to try and do it anyway, for always trying to do the best job possible because you never know who's going to be watching, and for just having the strength and courage to believe in myself and go out there and just have a shot, go and get it done. Because Aboriginal voices are powerful voices, and the more of us we can have sitting around the table with government, the better outcomes are going to be for our community and for the whole of Australia. The more Aboriginal voices we have, the better it is for us and the better it is for everybody. And your voice is just as important as anyone else's. That's my lesson I hope you get out of this. Your voice is important. Have a go. There are opportunities out there. Take those opportunities. And even though you might have a few false steps, like I did, when I came along and I failed in my architecture course, when I didn't like the degree I'd worked for all this time, changes will come. You'll find your path. You'll find the right thing for you. So that's my lesson for you all tonight. Cheers.